The galaxy was dying. Not from old age or natural disaster, but from war. A war that had lasted 800,000 years. Two ancient races fought across the stars like gods of destruction. The Zephyrians were beings of pure crystal and energy. They looked like living diamonds that could grow as tall as buildings. Blue light flowed through their transparent bodies like blood through veins. When they spoke, their voices sounded like wind chimes in a storm. They believed that chaos was evil, and that only perfect order could bring peace to the universe. The Vorthak were different but equally terrifying. They had started as living creatures long ago, but war had changed them. Now they were part machine, part flesh and part nightmare. Metal tubes grew from their bodies like twisted trees. Their eyes glowed red in faces that were sometimes human-like, sometimes insect-like, and sometimes just holes in metal masks. They thought as one giant mind spread across billions of bodies. To them, individual thought was a disease that had to be cured. Neither side remembered how the war began. Some old record spoke of a disagreement about how life should exist in the galaxy. The Zephyrians wanted every world to be organized and peaceful, like a perfect crystal garden. The Vorthak wanted every living thing to join their collective mind and work together as one. Both sides thought they were saving the galaxy from the other. The war had consumed everything. Whole star systems had been turned into weapons. Planets became battlefields where nothing could grow. Moons were hollowed out and filled with war machines. Even space itself was scarred with energy beams and debris from a million battles. Other races had tried to stop the fighting. The peaceful Malarians had offered to mediate. The Zephyrians turned their homeworld into glass. The warrior Krathos had tried to fight both sides. The Vorthak converted them into more soldiers. The wise ethereal minds had proposed a treaty. Both ancient enemies destroyed them for interfering. Hundreds of civilizations had risen and fallen while the war continued. Most never even learned about the conflict before it reached them. They would discover strange ships in their skies, then face weapons beyond their understanding. Some worlds surrendered and were absorbed by the Vorthak. Others fought and were destroyed by Zephyrian energy beams. A few tried to hide, but the war always found them. The galaxy became a graveyard of dead worlds and broken dreams. Ancient ruins on countless planets told the same story. Species that had built great cities, created beautiful art, and reached for the stars, all reduced to dust and memory. The war consumed everything in its path like a cosmic fire that could never be put out. After 800,000 years, both sides had evolved far beyond their original forms. The Zephyrians had become living weapons. They could shoot energy, beams from their crystal bodies that could cut through planets. They could travel faster than light by turning themselves into pure energy. Some of them were as large as cities floating through space like crystal mountains that brought death to everything they touched. The Vorthak had become something else entirely. They could take any living creature and change it into one of them. They built ships that were alive with hearts that pumped acid instead of blood, and engines that were grown instead of built. Their worlds were covered in metal forests where machines and flesh grew together in ways that hurt to look at. The war had reached a terrible balance. Neither side could win, but neither would surrender. They had created weapons that could destroy stars, but their enemies always found ways to survive. They had conquered thousands of worlds, but there were always more battles to fight. The Zephyrians controlled the inner regions of the galaxy with their energy technology. The Vorthak dominated the outer rim with their biological weapons. Between them lay a zone of constant battle. Dead fleets drifted in the darkness, too many to count. Automated weapons fired at anything that moved. Space itself was poisoned with radiation and nanomachines. No living thing could survive there for long. Both sides had forgotten what peace felt like. New generations of Zephyrians were grown already knowing that Vorthak were evil and had to be destroyed. Young Vorthak were programmed from birth to hate individual consciousness and crystal beings. The war had become their religion, their culture, and their only reason for existing. Sometimes small groups from both sides would try to break free from the endless fighting. Zephyrian philosophers would question whether perfect order was worth eternal war. Vorthak individuals would resist the collective mind and try to think for themselves. These rebels never lasted long. Their own people destroyed them as traitors and monsters. The galaxy had become a machine built only for war. Every resource went to building bigger weapons. Every new discovery was turned into a way to kill enemies. Art, music, literature, and love were forgotten concepts. Only battle tactics, weapon designs, and hatred remained. In the empty space between the fighting zones, strange things happened. the constant energy from Zephyrian weapons mixed with Vorthak biological experiments to create new forms of matter. Entire regions of space became twisted and dangerous. Time moved differently there. Gravity flowed backward. Colors that had no names hurt the eyes of anyone who saw them. The few remaining neutral species lived in hidden colonies, always moving, always afraid. They told stories of the time before the war when the galaxy was full of different kinds of life. But these were just legends now. Children born in the hidden colonies could not imagine a universe without war. Both ancient enemies had become so focused on fighting each other that they forgot to look beyond their conflict. They did not notice that in a small, unimportant solar system far from the main battle zones, something new was beginning to stir. A young species was learning to use fire, to plant crops, and to wonder about the lights in their night sky. The Zephyrians were too busy perfecting their crystal weapons to care about primitive creatures on a small blue planet. The Vorthak were too focused on spreading their collective mind to notice individual thoughts arising in biological beings that still dreamed alone. Neither side realized that their 800,000-year war was about to encounter something they had never faced before. Not another warrior race or wise mediator, but a species that looked at problems differently. A species that might see solutions where ancient minds saw only enemies. The humans were coming to the stars, carrying with them something the galaxy had forgotten existed. They brought chaos and order together in the same minds. They could think as individuals while still working together. They could see both sides of any problem and imagine new possibilities that pure logic or collective consciousness could never reach. The eternal war was about to meet the ultimate wildcards, and nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same again. Captain Elena Vasquez stared at the massive object floating in the darkness ahead of her ship. After 2 years of traveling through empty space, the crew of the UES Endeavour had found something that should not exist. The thing was huge, bigger than any building on Earth, and shaped like a crystal flower made of blue glass. It did not move or send signals. It just hung there, in the void, like a beautiful, dead monument. "What do you think it is, Captain?" asked Lieutenant Torres, the ship's pilot. His hands stayed ready on the controls, but his eyes were fixed on the strange object outside their windows. "I don't know," Elena replied. "But we came out here to explore, didn't we? Sarah, what do your sensors tell us?" Dr. Sarah Chen looked up from her science station. She was the ship's expert on alien life, though until now she had only studied theories and ancient radio signals. "It's definitely not natural. The crystal structure is too perfect. There are energy readings inside it, very faint, but still active. Captain, I think this thing might still be alive somehow." Elena made her decision. "Take us closer, slowly." The Endeavour moved toward the crystal object using tiny bursts from its engines. As they got closer, they could see more details. The blue light inside the crystal pulsed like a heartbeat. Strange symbols covered the surface in patterns that hurt to look at directly. The whole thing was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. "Captain, I'm reading a docking port," Torres called out. "It's almost like this thing wants us to come inside." Elena thought about her orders from Earth Command. Find out if humanity was alone in the universe. Learn everything possible about any alien life or technology. Come home with answers. This was exactly what they had come to find. "Dock with it," she ordered. The Endeavour connected to the crystal ship with a soft thud. Elena suited up and led a small team inside. The alien ship's interior was like walking inside a jewel. Everything was made of the same blue crystal, and soft light flowed through the walls like water. The air was breathable but tasted like lightning. Their footsteps echoed strangely, making musical sounds instead of normal echoes. Dr. Chen was scanning everything with her instruments. "Captain, this technology is incredibly advanced. The crystal isn't just decoration, it's the computer, the engine, the hull, everything all at once. This ship could probably travel faster than light." "Could we learn from it?" Elena asked. "Maybe. With time. But Captain, there's something else. This ship isn't dead. It's sleeping. Our presence might wake it up." Before Elena could respond, the crystal around them began to glow brighter. The musical echoes became a low humming sound that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The walls started to pulse with faster rhythms. "Everyone back to the ship. Now!" Elena shouted. They ran through the crystal corridors as the alien ship came alive around them. Blue energy crackled along the walls. Strange symbols appeared and disappeared in the air. By the time they reached the Endeavour and disconnected, the crystal ship was fully awake and moving. The beautiful flower-like object unfolded into something that looked more like a weapon. Long spikes of crystal grew from its sides. Energy beams began charging between its petals. The blue light had turned angry white. "It's targeting us," Torres yelled as he pushed the engines to full power. Before Elena could give orders, space around them exploded with new arrivals. Ships appeared from nowhere. But these were completely different from the crystal vessel. They looked like metal insects mixed with diseased flesh. Pipes and tubes grew from their hulls like veins. Their engines left trails of green fire that smelled of decay even through the Endeavor's sealed hull. "My God," Dr. Chen whispered. "There are two different alien species here." The crystal ship and the organic vessels immediately began firing at each other with weapons that made no sense. The crystal beings shot beams of pure white light that could bend and curve through space. Where they hit the organic ships, metal and flesh simply stopped existing. The insect-like vessels responded with swarms of living missiles that moved like angry wasps and exploded in clouds of acid. The small human ship was caught in the middle of a battle between forces it could not understand. Energy beams missed the Endeavor by inches. Living weapons tried to attach to their hull before Torres could shake them off. The space around them became a storm of destruction. "We have to get out of here," Torres shouted over the sound of alarms. But Dr. Chen suddenly grabbed Elena's arm. "Wait, they're not shooting at us. They're ignoring us completely. To them, we're not even worth noticing." Elena watched the battle rage around them. The crystal ship moved like a dancer, graceful and deadly. The organic vessels swarmed like insects, coordinating their attacks without any visible communication. Both sides seemed to have unlimited weapons and complete hatred for each other. Then Sarah did something that changed everything. She opened a communication channel on all frequencies and began broadcasting. Not words, because she didn't know their languages. Instead, she sent mathematical formulas, prime numbers, the value of pi, basic physics, things that any intelligent species would understand. Both alien fleets stopped firing. The silence in space was more frightening than the battle had been. Every ship, crystal and organic, turned to look at the tiny human vessel. Sarah continued her broadcast, but now she added something new. Images of Earth, pictures of humans helping each other, mathematical proofs of cooperation. She showed them cities where millions of people lived together peacefully. She broadcast music, art, and poetry translated into mathematical concepts. Then she sent the simplest message of all. A circle divided into two equal parts with an equal sign between them. The mathematical symbol for balance and peace. The response was immediate and terrifying. Every alien weapon in the area turned toward the Endeavor. Both sides seemed to agree on one thing for the first time in the battle. The humans had to be destroyed or captured for study. Crystal beams and organic missiles filled the space where the Endeavor had been, but Torres had already moved. His pilot skills, learned from years of navigating Earth's crowded space lanes, kept them alive as they dodged between alien weapons. "Why are they shooting at us now?" Elena demanded. "Because," Sarah said quietly, "I think we just did something neither side has seen in a very long time. We offered peace. To them, that might be more alien than anything else in the universe." The crystal ships moved to surround them with cold precision. The organic vessels swarmed from all sides with hungry efficiency. Elena realized they had discovered something incredible. Humanity was not alone in the universe, but they had also discovered something terrible. The universe was at war, and peace was the most foreign concept of all. As capture became inevitable, Elena wondered if humanity's first contact with alien intelligence would also be their last. The beautiful crystal beings and the frightening, organic collective both seemed to want the same thing: to understand how creatures could think thoughts that had been impossible for 800,000 years. The Endeavor's engines died as organic tendrils wrapped around the hull like chains. Crystal beams locked onto their systems and held them motionless. Elena and her crew were about to become specimens in a laboratory run by beings who had forgotten that war was not the only way to exist. But they had also accomplished something incredible. For the first time in millennia, two ancient enemies had stopped fighting each other to focus on a new mystery. Humanity had ended a battle not through force or surrender, but through the simple act of suggesting that peace was possible. Whether that made them saviors or fools remained to be seen. Dr. Sarah Chen woke up inside a crystal prison that sang with soft musical tones. The walls were transparent blue, and she could see strange geometric shapes floating past outside. Everything around her was perfect, mathematical, and beautiful, in a way that made her head hurt if she looked too long. A voice spoke to her, but not through her ears. The words appeared directly in her mind. translated from thoughts she could never understand. You are the chaos creature that broadcasts impossibilities. We are the Zephyrian Collective Intelligence Prime. You will explain your mental aberrations. Sarah sat up slowly, trying to stay calm. Through her crystal cell walls, she could see other shapes moving in the distance. They looked like living diamonds that could change their form at will. Some were tall and thin like spears of light. Others were wide and complex like crystal flowers. All of them glowed with the same cold blue energy. "My name is Sarah Chen," she said aloud, hoping they could understand. "I'm a scientist from Earth. We didn't mean to interfere in your war." The voice in her mind sounded confused. War is not interference. War is existence. Order must defeat chaos. Individual thought must be corrected. You broadcast concepts that cannot exist. Explain. Sarah realized she was dealing with beings who thought completely differently from humans. To them, the war was not a problem to be solved but a natural law like gravity. The idea of ending it was like suggesting that water should flow upward. "We come from a world where different groups of people find ways to work together," she said, carefully. "We fight sometimes, but we also make peace. We think both order and chaos can be good in different situations." The crystal being closest to her cell changed shape, becoming sharp and angular. The mental voice turned cold. "Impossible. Chaos destroys order. Order corrects chaos. There is no middle position. You are either defective or lying." Over the following days, the Zephyrians studied Sarah with instruments that felt like cold fingers touching her thoughts. They couldn't understand how her mind worked. When they showed her perfect mathematical proofs, she could appreciate their beauty while also seeing how they could be improved. When they demonstrated flawless logical systems, she found creative ways to solve problems the systems couldn't handle. "Your brain produces contradictions," the voice told her after one session. "You hold opposing concepts without malfunction. This should be impossible for any thinking being." Meanwhile, in a very different kind of prison, Commander Torres was learning about the other side of the ancient war. The Vorthak had captured him and brought him to one of their living ships. Everything around him was organic and mechanical. At the same time, walls that looked like metal had veins running through them. Machines grew like plants from floors made of something that felt like warm skin. The Vorthak who studied him looked almost human, except for the metal tubes that grew from his spine and the red lights where his eyes should be. When he spoke, it was with the voice of thousands speaking as one. "We are Vorthak Study Unit 70439. You are the individual consciousness that suggests collective harmony. This is impossible. Individual thought creates only conflict and waste. You will be corrected and joined to the unity." Torres had been a military officer before joining the space program. He understood war, tactics, and strategy. As the Vorthak showed him battle records from their endless conflict with the Zephyrians, he saw patterns they had missed. "You're making the same mistakes over and over," he told them. "For 800,000 years, you've used the same tactics against the same enemy. No wonder you can't win." The collective voice sounded angry. "Our tactics are perfect. The unity cannot be wrong. Individual perspectives create only error." "But that's exactly the problem," Torres insisted. "You think as one mind, so you can't see solutions that require different points of view. You need individual creativity to break the patterns." The Vorthak study unit stood very still for a long time. Torres could hear clicking and buzzing sounds as millions of collective members discussed his words across the galaxy. In her crystal cell, Sarah was having a similar conversation with her captors. She had convinced them to show her their history of the war, and what she saw broke her heart. Both sides had once been different. The Zephyrians had been artists and philosophers who loved beauty and truth. The Vorthak had been explorers and builders who worked together to create wonderful things. The war had changed them both into something smaller than what they used to be. They had forgotten their original purposes and cultures. All they knew now was fighting. "You could be so much more," Sarah told the Zephyrian intelligence. "Your crystal technology could create incredible art. Your energy manipulation could build instead of destroy. You've turned yourselves into weapons when you could be creators." "Creation is chaos," the voice replied, but it sounded less certain than before. "No," Sarah said. "Creation is order and chaos working together. The most beautiful things in the universe come from structure and spontaneity combined, like music or crystals or life itself." For the first time, the Zephyrian didn't have an immediate answer. Captain Elena Vasquez and Dr. Martinez, the ship's engineer, had been captured by a different Vorthak unit. They found themselves in a biomechanical laboratory where the collective was trying to understand human cooperation. The Vorthak couldn't comprehend how individual humans could work together without being forced to think the same thoughts. Elena watched as the alien scientists studied recordings of human teams working together. They saw human soldiers coordinating in battle, scientists collaborating on research, and families caring for each other. To the Vorthak, it looked like magic. Your species maintains individual consciousness while achieving collective goals, the collective voice said. This should create only conflict and failure. Instead, you achieve efficiency we cannot match. Explain. Elena thought about her crew on the Endeavor. They were all different people with different skills and personalities. But they worked together because they chose to, not because they had to. We're stronger because we're different, she explained. When I need to make a command decision, I think like a leader. When Torres flies the ship, he thinks like a pilot. When Sarah studies something new, she thinks like a scientist. We each do what we're best at. But how do you prevent conflict? The collective asked. We don't, Elena said. We argue all the time, but arguing helps us find better solutions. When people disagree, they have to explain their ideas clearly. The best ideas survive and the weak ones get thrown out. The Vorthak collective spent days trying to process this concept. Individual disagreement leading to collective success was beyond their understanding. As both alien species studied their human captives, something unprecedented happened. Zephyrian and Vorthak researchers began sharing information about their discoveries. For the first time in 800,000 years, the ancient enemies started talking to each other instead of fighting. They compared notes about human brain scans, behavioral patterns, and cultural concepts. Both sides were finding the same impossible thing. Humans seemed to be evolutionary answers to problems neither alien species knew they had. The Zephyrians had perfected order but lost creativity. The Vorthak had perfected unity, but lost adaptability. Humans had somehow kept both chaos and order, individual thought and collective action, logic and intuition working together in the same minds. Dr. Chen became the first human to witness direct communication between Zephyrian and Vorthak scientists. She watched through her crystal cell walls as geometric light patterns talked with organic signal pulses. They were sharing data about human psychology and debating what it meant. You are the bridge concepts, the Zephyrian voice told her. You connect opposites that cannot be connected. You make peace possible between forces that must be enemies. This changes everything we understand about existence. Sarah realized she was watching the first peace talks in 800,000 years, and they were happening because humans had shown both sides that their fundamental assumptions about reality might be wrong. The war was not ending yet, but for the first time since it began, both ancient enemies were considering the possibility that there might be another way to exist. The humans had become living proof that chaos and order, individual and collective, logic and creativity, didn't have to be enemies. They could be partners instead. The meeting was impossible, but it was happening anyway. In a neutral zone between Zephyrian and Vorthak territory, representatives from both ancient enemies sat across from each other for the first time in 800,000 years. Between them stood Dr. Sarah Chen, no longer a prisoner but something entirely new, a translator between two ways of thinking that had forgotten how to communicate. The Zephyrian representative was called Prime Logic Crystalline 7, a being of pure, geometric beauty that changed shape as it thought. Its crystal body reflected light in patterns that hurt human eyes to follow directly. Across from it sat Collective Voice Unit 12,847, whose metal and flesh body writhed with cables and tubes that connected to the greater Vorthak mind. This gathering serves no logical purpose, Prime Logic stated, its mental voice reaching all three beings at once. Chaos entities cannot be reasoned with. They must be corrected or destroyed. Individual consciousness creates only disorder, the collective voice replied through speakers grown from its throat. Unity is the only path to peace. Separate thoughts must be merged. Sarah stood between them, feeling the weight of 800,000 years of hatred pressing down on her shoulders, but she also felt something else and hope. Both sides had agreed to this meeting, which meant some part of them wanted to find another way. What if you're both right? She asked quietly. Both aliens turned to stare at her. The crystal being's light patterns became sharp and angry. The organic collective's red sensors focused on her like laser sights. Contradictory statements cannot both be correct, Prime Logic said. This is basic logic. But that's exactly my point, Sarah continued. You're trying to apply the same logic to every situation. What if different problems need different solutions? What if order works best in some places, and unity works best in others? She gestured to the space station they were meeting on, built jointly by human, Zephyrian, and Vorthak engineers. Look at this place. The Zephyrian crystal technology provides the power and structure. It's perfect, orderly, and beautiful. The Vorthak biomechanical systems handle life support and adaptive functions. They respond to changing needs instantly, and human coordination systems help both technologies work together. Prime logic shifted into a more complex geometric pattern. You suggest that order and chaos can coexist? Not chaos, Sarah corrected. Flexibility, creativity, the ability to change when change is needed. Order provides stability, but life needs growth and adaptation. 2. The collective voices cables twitched with millions of rapid conversations across the Vorthak network. You propose that individual thoughts can strengthen unity rather than weaken it? That's exactly what I'm saying. When people work together, by choice, they're more creative and effective than when they're forced to think the same way. Different perspectives help you see solutions that one mind might miss. Over the following weeks, the peace talks continued. Sarah found herself explaining concepts that seemed obvious to humans, but revolutionary to the ancient enemies. She showed them how human families worked, individual people with different personalities who chose to love and support each other. She explained human governments where people with different ideas competed peacefully, and the best ideas were chosen by voting instead of warfare. Most importantly, she helped both sides understand what the other had been trying to achieve all along. The Zephyrians didn't want to destroy life. They wanted to create perfect harmony. The Vorthak didn't want to eliminate individuality. They wanted to end the loneliness and conflict that came from beings who couldn't understand each other. You both want the same thing, Sarah told them during one session. You want peace and happiness for all life in the galaxy. You just have different ideas about how to achieve it. Commander Torres, who had escaped from Vorthak custody and made his way to the peace station, brought a different perspective. As a military officer, he understood the strategic situation better than anyone. This war can't be won by either side, he told both representatives. You've been fighting for 800,000 years and you're still stalemated. The only way it ends is if both sides lose everything, or if you find a way to stop fighting. He showed them tactical analyses of major battles throughout the war. Look at this pattern. The Zephyrians win when they can use their energy manipulation in open space. The Vorthak win when they can use their adaptive abilities in complex environments. You're not really fighting each other. You're fighting the wrong battles in the wrong places. Prime Logic and Collective Voice studied the data together, their first true collaboration in millennia. What they discovered shocked them both. Torres was right. Neither side had been using their strengths effectively because they had been too focused on destroying each other to think strategically. What if, Torres suggested, instead of fighting over territory, you divided responsibilities? Zephyrians could handle exploration and energy management for the galaxy. Vorthak could manage biological systems and resource distribution. Humans could handle coordination between different groups. The idea was so simple and so radical that both ancient beings sat in silence for hours, processing it through their respective decision-making systems. But not everyone wanted peace. On both sides, extremist factions viewed any cooperation as the ultimate betrayal. War had become their religion, their identity, and their only reason for existing. The idea that the enemy could become a partner was more threatening than any weapon. Captain Elena Vasquez was leading the rescue mission when the hardliners attacked. She had commandeered every available human ship, convinced several Zephyrian and Vorthak moderates to join her, and was racing toward the peace station when the shooting started. Extremist Zephyrians called themselves the Pure Light Faction. They believed that any Zephyrian who cooperated with organic life had been infected by chaos and must be cleansed. Their crystal ships were works of terrible art, all sharp edges and burning light. The Vorthak hardliners were known as the True Unity. They saw individual consciousness as a disease that had to be cured, even if it meant destroying every thinking being in the galaxy. Their ships looked like flying nightmares of metal and flesh, designed to inspire fear and convert enemies into more soldiers. Both extremist fleets converged on the peace station at the same time, their hatred for each other temporarily overcome by their shared horror at the idea of cooperation. For the first time in the war, they were fighting on the same side, against peace itself. The battle was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Elena found herself commanding a mixed fleet of human ships, moderate Zephyrian crystals, and reformed Vorthak biovessels. They fought with tactics that neither ancient enemy had ever imagined. True cooperation between different technologies and different ways of thinking. Human pilots used their adaptability to coordinate between crystal energy weapons and organic, living missiles. Zephyrian power systems were integrated with Vorthak biological sensors to create new forms of defense. Moderate Vorthak units shared tactical data with Zephyrian strategic computers, creating battle plans neither could have developed alone. The hardliners had more experience and more powerful weapons, but they were fighting the same old war with the same old methods. The Peace Coalition was fighting something entirely new, a war to end war, using cooperation as their ultimate weapon. Sarah coordinated the defense from inside the station, her human intuition helping both alien technologies work together more effectively than their creators had thought possible. Torres flew combat missions in ships that combined all three species' technologies into something greater than the sum of their parts. When the battle finally ended, it was because something unprecedented had happened. The hardliners had been defeated not by superior firepower, but by superior cooperation. The galaxy's first integrated fleet had proven that beings could be stronger together than apart. As the last extremist ships retreated or surrendered, Elena looked out at the mixed fleet floating around the peace station. Crystal ships shared power with organic vessels. Biomechanical repair drones fixed human hulls with materials that grew instead of being manufactured. Everyone was helping everyone else. "I think," Sarah said over the communication system, "this is what peace looks like. The war wasn't over yet. There were still millions of ships on both sides that hadn't chosen a position. Entire worlds still believed that only total victory could bring security. But for the first time in 800,000 years, there was a third option. Not Zephyrian victory, not Vorthak triumph, but synthesis. Different strengths working together to create something better than either could achieve alone. The galaxy was learning a new word, a human word, cooperation. 2 years after humanity's first contact with alien intelligence, Dr. Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck of Unity Station and watched something that would have been impossible before humans arrived in the galaxy. Zephyrian crystal ships and Vorthak biovessels worked side by side, rebuilding a world that had been destroyed in the ancient war. The planet below had once been called Harmony by its original inhabitants. Now it was just another dead rock, its atmosphere burned away by energy weapons and its surface scarred by biological warfare. But as Sarah watched, crystal towers grew from Zephyrian seeds while Vorthak bioengineers restored the soil with living machines that turned poison into nutrients. "It's working," she said to Commander Torres, who stood beside her watching human coordination teams manage the complex restoration project. "They're actually doing it." Torres nodded, but his expression remained cautious. "On this one world? Yes, but there are thousands of others and billions of beings who still think the only choice is victory or death." He was right to be careful. The peace was fragile and new. Many Zephyrians still believed that chaos had to be eliminated from the universe. Many Vorthak still thought that individual consciousness was a disease, and many humans were overwhelmed by the responsibility of being the bridge between two ancient civilizations that were still learning to trust each other. But progress was happening, one small step at a time. The Galactic Synthesis Council had been established on Unity Station, with representatives from all three species working together to solve problems that had seemed impossible when approached from only one perspective. Captain Elena Vasquez had been promoted to admiral and now commanded the first truly integrated fleet in galactic history. Human ships provided coordination and tactical flexibility. Zephyrian crystal vessels contributed energy manipulation and strategic computing power. Vorthak bioships offered adaptive technology and biological expertise. Together, they could handle threats and challenges that no single species could manage alone. The biggest challenge wasn't technical or military. It was psychological. After 800,000 years of total war, peace felt strange and uncomfortable to everyone involved. Zephyrian soldiers had to learn that not every problem required an energy beam solution. Vorthak collective minds had to accept that individual creativity often produced better results than group consensus. And humans had to cope with being mediators in conflicts that involved weapons capable of destroying solar systems. Dr. Martinez, the engineer from the original Endeavour mission, had become the head of the Technological Integration Project. His job was to help Zephyrian crystal science and Vorthak bioengineering work together. The results were beyond anything any single species had achieved. Crystal biological hybrid computers could think in ways that pure logic or pure instinct never could. Energy manipulation techniques enhanced by living systems created tools that could reshape matter at the molecular level. Healing technologies that combined crystal precision with biological adaptation could cure injuries and diseases that had been fatal for millennia. The hardest part, Martinez explained to a group of mixed-species engineers, is remembering that we're not trying to make everyone the same. We're trying to make everyone better at being what they already are. The cultural exchanges were just as important as the technological ones. Zephyrian art, with its perfect mathematical beauty, inspired human musicians to create symphonies based on crystalline harmonics. Human stories about individual heroes making difficult choices fascinated Vorthak collective minds that had never considered personal responsibility. Vorthak collective experiences, where millions of beings could share thoughts and emotions directly, showed humans new possibilities for empathy and understanding. Not everything worked perfectly. Some Zephyrian crystal structures were too orderly for biological life to thrive in them. Some Vorthak biosystems grew out of control when not properly regulated. Some human coordination methods broke down when applied to minds that thought completely differently from human minds. But failure was just another problem to solve, not a reason to give up. Each mistake taught them something new about how to combine different approaches more effectively. The galaxy was becoming a laboratory for cooperation on a scale never before imagined. The exploration fleets were making incredible discoveries. Led by joint crews and equipped with hybrid technologies, they were reaching parts of the galaxy that had been impossible to explore during the war. Ancient ruins of civilizations destroyed in the conflict were being found and studied. Some contained knowledge and art that enriched all three species. Others held warnings about the dangers of unlimited warfare. Most importantly, they were finding survivors. Hidden colonies of species that had gone into hiding when the war reached their systems were emerging from their shelters. Refugee populations that had fled to the galaxy's edge were returning to reclaim their homeworlds. Ancient allies of both Zephyrians and Vorthak, who had been presumed extinct, were making contact again. The galaxy was bigger and more diverse than anyone had remembered. The war had hidden hundreds of species, thousands of unique cultures, and millions of different ways of thinking about existence. As peace spread, this hidden diversity was emerging like flowers after a long winter. Dr. Chen had established the Cultural Preservation Project to document and protect these rediscovered civilizations. Working with both Zephyrian information systems and Vorthak biological memory storage, they were creating a living library of galactic culture that would ensure no species' heritage would ever be lost again. Every civilization that survived the war has something to teach us, Sarah explained to the council. The ethereal minds developed philosophy that reconciles individual identity with collective responsibility. The Malarian refugees created art forms that express emotions no single species can feel alone. The Krathos warriors discovered honor, codes that turned conflict into cooperation. But the greatest discovery was happening on Earth itself. Humanity's homeworld had become a pilgrimage site for beings from across the galaxy who wanted to understand how cooperation was possible. Zephyrians studied human cities where millions of individuals lived in harmony, without losing their personal identities. Vorthak observed human families where separate minds chose to care for each other, without being forced to think the same thoughts. Earth's greatest export was no longer technology or resources, but ideas. Human concepts like democracy, where people with different opinions chose leaders peacefully. Human practices like science, where individuals competed with ideas instead of weapons to discover truth. Human emotions like love, where separate beings chose to become stronger together rather than alone. The transformation wasn't limited to the major powers. Smaller species throughout the galaxy were finding their own ways to benefit from the new, cooperative approach. Trade networks that had been impossible during the war were connecting worlds across vast distances. Cultural exchanges were creating new art, music, and literature that no single species could have imagined. Scientific collaborations were solving problems that had puzzled researchers for millennia. Admiral Vasquez often traveled to Earth to report on the fleet's progress. During one visit, she stood in the same room where the Endeavour mission had been planned just a few years earlier. Through the windows, she could see Zephyrian crystal gardens growing in perfect mathematical patterns, while Vorthak biodomes provided food for Earth's expanding population of galactic visitors. "When we sent you out there," Earth Command told her, "we hoped you'd find out if we were alone in the universe. We never imagined you'd come back with the universe itself." Elena smiled. We didn't find the universe. We helped it find itself. The war was officially declared over on the 5th anniversary of first contact. The ceremony took place simultaneously on Unity Station, the crystal homeworld of the Zephyrians, the collective consciousness centers of the Vorthak, and Earth itself. For the first time in 800,000 years, the galaxy celebrated, together. But even as they celebrated peace, everyone understood that the real work was just beginning. Building cooperation was harder than fighting wars. Creating trust took longer than destroying enemies. Learning to see problems as opportunities for collaboration instead of reasons for conflict was a challenge that would take generations to fully master. Sarah Chen, now director of the Synthesis Institute, spent her time teaching the next generation of galactic citizens. Her students included young Zephyrians learning to appreciate chaos, young Vorthak discovering individual creativity, and young humans trying to understand minds that thought in ways no human had ever imagined. The war ended, she would tell them, not because someone won, but because everyone decided there were better ways to use their energy. The Zephyrians stopped trying to impose perfect order and started creating perfect beauty. The Vorthak stopped trying to eliminate individual thought and started helping individuals connect with each other. Humans stopped being afraid of differences and started seeing them as opportunities. The galaxy had learned the most important lesson in the universe. Some problems couldn't be solved by becoming stronger, smarter, or more numerous.